I think we'll get started. Welcome to those who are able to join us virtually in person today from both the Delaware and Marion Area Safety Councils and those watching the recording afterwards. Before we get too far into today, both Holly and I have some announcements related to the next program year for Safety Council. We were informed of some changes happening to next year's program year at a managers meeting with all safety councils across the state last month. And those changes will, facilitate a change in how things are run. And there'll be some things that are similar to this program year and some things that are different. The unfortunate, aspect of this moving forward is that there will be a fully virtual meeting environment for the entire program year until July 1st of 2022. Will be fully virtual again, just like we were this year. So that means, of course, no in-person meetings, no attendance will be taken at these. And unfortunately, the rebate incentives will not be offered again for this next program year. Much more information will be sent to you in an email form, but the biggest takeaway is that while this has been a fantastic partnership to have between the Delaware and Marion Safety Councils, program changes will make it so that we will be separate from each other starting in July next month, and back to having separate virtual meetings on different days, back to a kind of a regular schedule, I believe, for both of ours, in terms of ours being the second Wednesday, and I think Delaware's is the third Wednesday. So again, much more information will come in an email form, I believe, later on this week, if not next week, with some dates and times, of course. But wanted to get that out of the way first, and saying that we really valued the partnership. It's been awesome to work with the Delaware Safety Council for this program year, and it's been just great experience. Certainly, I hope for both our members and for the Delaware members. So again, thank you so much for that. I don't know if Holly has anything to say.
Just that it's been fun, and our Safety Council members also will be receiving an email with dates for next year. One of the odd things about it will be that the October and April meetings will be sponsored. There'll be mega meetings sponsored by BWC. So those dates will not necessarily be the same day of the month as our regular meetings. Also, the March meeting will be Safety Council's Safety Congress again. That's March 9th and 10th. So that will replace that month's meeting. So stay on your toes, watch your emails. And I'm sorry, Marion, that we can't help you anymore with, dude, what are you thinking? If you want to borrow any of that, because I know how much you've learned from us from that.
Oh, so much.
Over the years, you are certainly welcome. We will be happy to sell you those segments so you can pass that wisdom on to your members. But it's been great fun. We love partnering with Marion.
Thank you. And with that, although I believe we're having some slight technical difficulties, I do want to announce our speaker today, and then when he's able to get back in, we'll jump into the presentation. But first, we'll go into some other BWC announcements. But again, we have Michael Coates. There was a change in the topic that Michael will be speaking on. He is an industrial hygienist with the BWC, and we've sent out things about being an ergonomic presentation. However, we're shifting that to a audio conservation, hearing conservation program presentation, and a respiratory protection presentation, both of which, of course, are still very safety related and relevant. And so I apologize for the shift in presentation topic, but his title is this loud? Should I be concerned about the dust? And again, the presentation will give guidance on hearing conservation program, and will cover voluntary respiratory protection and how to fulfill its obligations. But before we get into Michael's presentation, we'll first hand it over to Laura Smith, the BWC representative from the Marion Safety Council, on some BWC announcements.
Hi, everyone. for some reason, I can't share my screen, which is totally fine. I don't have anything you guys really need to see, but just as a update, we do have a trenching safety stand-down webinar occurring on June 15th from 10 a.m. till 12 p.m. You can register on our website. It's totally free, but we just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the safety hazards when it comes to trenches. They're very deadly. People don't take them seriously. So we do have a trenching safety stand-down webinar during that safety stand-down week. We're also offering 2 PERP webinars, which are kind of interesting. It's a PERP perspective on the fire chief's role in compliance. And then we also have the Fight Beyond the Fire, battling carcinogens before, during, and after fires. So both of those are going to be free webinars. The fire chief is going to be on June 21st from 10 a.m. to 12:15. And then the battling carcinogens is going to be on June 23rd from 10 a.m. until 11 a.m. And again, I believe those flyers got sent out via the safety councils. So just make sure you look at those. The links should be active and easy to just click and follow and register for those webinars that we're putting on. Along with our webinars, we do have some online class offerings that, again, the safety council should be sending out. Just kind of forwarding to you guys all the various things we have currently going on with the Bureau. In OSHA news, a new guidance documents on beryllium safety are out. They released 6 new documents to aid employers in following the new beryllium safety regulations. So all of those are on OSHA's websites. There's quick cards out there that make it really easy to find all that information. So that is out there for you guys. And then just in other news, I put in here a stress list with deep breaths. Just to remember, stress is still a problem. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I currently have both of my children at home because my son got exposed to COVID at daycare and they closed his entire daycare for the week. So precautionary, keep the kids home, make sure that they're safe. But that's a stress I wasn't anticipating this week. So make sure you guys are still taking, care of yourselves. We have the BWC Better You, Better Ohio program. We're always promoting wellness, and make sure that you guys are promoting wellness to your employees, talking to them, making sure that they are handling their stress, because stress at home can, we all know, overlap into stress at work. We just want to try to make sure that everyone is as happy and healthy as possible. So make sure, again, you guys are promoting that stress-free, deep breath type of mentality. So with that, I'll pass it back to Matt, and thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you as always. A special shout out to Ken Belcher. I saw Ken is joining us today. Thank you. He's the Employer Services Supervisor with BWC Division of Safety and Hygiene as well. So good to see him there as well. I believe Michael is back in.
Possibly. Can we hear me? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. It's a little grainy, but I think we can certainly pick this up.
All right. I apologize. I'm not sure what's happening on my end here, but we will just try to go through. I am having trouble with the sharing process. I'm having trouble with my camera. There's not much on this end right now that isn't the problem. So can you see me okay? Am I in your field of view?
No, the camera is still off. I can do an ask to start video here. Let's see if that helps. Okay.
All right. So if it's all right with you, we'll try this and see if we can't muddle through. Good afternoon or good morning, everybody. My name is Michael Coates. I'm an industrial hygienist. We're going to talk a little bit about industrial hygiene today. And what I'm going to do is I want to talk about noise and a little bit about respiratory protection. The main issue that I want to go over is how did we get here with regards to a lot of our permissible exposure limits. What happened in 1970 is that OSHA, promulgated the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, put together a series of documents that are now what we call our standards. And during that process, they came up with permissible exposure limits for noise. And one of the things that will happen as we go through this is that people will say, Michael, I've got some noise results. Can you tell me what they mean? And we have to go back to the beginning in order to find out what we're actually discussing and what we're referring to. As I said, OSHA came through and they said, what we're going to do is we're going to have exposure limits for not only noise, but we're also going to have it for a number of chemicals. They took the best information at the time from NIOSH and the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, and they came out with permissible exposure limits for things like dust, which they said would be 15 milligrams per meter cubed. They then also said we're going to have a noise exposure at 90 decibels. Now, the problem with industrial hygiene is that oftentimes we're using terms that are difficult for people to wrap their heads around. So during this course of this presentation, I'm also going to try to get you some information so that some of these numbers don't seem quite so obscure to you. So we're back to 1970. They said that what we're going to do is we're going to have a permissible exposure limit for noise, and it's going to be 90 decibels. Now, they also said that we're going to have programs associated with each of these. At the end of the presentation, apparently we're going to have access to the documents, all right? I am not, this is horrible, but I am not able to share my screen right now either. So just because of technical difficulties, I'm going to say that it's possibly my AARP card that is causing some of this, but I haven't necessarily had problems in the past, so we're gonna move on. But what we're going to give you is we're going to give you all the information that you need for a hearing conservation program. And it basically covers 6 different aspects. And it starts out with, do you have a problem? As I mentioned, in 1970, what happened is that they came out with a permissible exposure limit of 90. And as you might know, since 1970, the science has been improving. And so in 1983, they revisited this noise exposure level, and they said, you know what? We know that people are losing their hearing at a much higher rate than what they should be. And what we're going to do then is we're going to have a hearing conservation program. That hearing conservation program is also going to be law, but it's only going to be for those in industry. The construction standard, which is separate, is going to still remain at 90. Now, they did put a caveat in the construction standard that says you should be following the guidelines for the hearing conservation program. So if you're out there and you have a construction firm, then it's not a bad idea for you also to do that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. What we've got here now is we've got the hearing conservation summary. And you will notice that number 1 is monitoring. As I said, we're going to be monitoring, but we have to know what we're actually monitoring for. We're monitoring noise, and we're looking for a level of 85 decibels. And if you look under that number 1 there, you'll notice that it says 85 decibels or a dose of 50%. So how do we do that? We do that a number of different ways. We use something called a sound level meter, which will give us an instantaneous reading. That sound level meter is going to be on the A scale. This is a very, obviously it's a very expensive monitor. It's about $1,200, but you yourself, if you want to know whether or not you've got a problem and it's 85 decibels or not, you can do something yourself if you have a cell phone. The cell phones now have apps that you can download, and they are excellent. The app for the one that we're personally using, and it's only for iOS systems, this particular phone for Apple, is the NIOSH, and you can download the NIOSH SLM. I'm telling you this because if you do download an app, I want you to do a couple of different things. I need you to make sure that you're measuring decibels in the A scale. The A scale is closest to the human ear. The A scale, and we have A scale, B scale, C scale, D scale, and we have Z scale. Most of the apps that you're going to be downloading are going to give it to you either in the A scale or the C scale. You want to make sure that you're doing that in the A scale. And for the particular NIOSH one, you can go down into the settings button and it will help you with that. You will also notice that it has different standards that you can follow. You can follow the OSHA standard. You can also follow recommended standards. As I mentioned, in 1970, it was 90 decibels for the permissible exposure limit. In 1983, it became the action level of 85. Since then, we also know that the data that we have is not really sufficient to protect people's hearing. So now, if you have the Division of Safety and Hygiene, when we're able to come back out and monitor, you're going to get 3 sets of data. And 3 sets of data can be a little overwhelming for some people. And it also makes it difficult when people just hand us 1 set of data that we have to figure out what we're dealing with. Let's simplify this quite a bit. If you are in industry and you want to be following the hearing conservation program at 85 decibels, you need to have a hearing conservation program if it is 85 decibels as a time-weighted average over 8 hours. It's relatively simple at that particular point in time. Then it becomes a little bit easier with regards to if it's 90 and above. If it's 90 and above, you have to make sure that people are wearing their hearing protection. What you can do is you can download an app and you can go out on the floor, and everybody can easily grab a phone now. And by the way, these, I was skeptical at first that you could use your smartphone and get decent readings. It's been my experience that the readings that we're getting with this are plus or minus 2 decibels. Which, by the way, is about the same as what we're going to get if we come out and do a full 8 hours of monitoring. Having said that, when you're going out and you're doing a spot check, you're really only figuring out how loud a particular instrument is. Something else that you want to be careful of is when you're monitoring for whatever it is that you're looking for. Let's say I have a noise source here, all right? I want to make sure and stay about 1 foot away from it to find out whether or not what the decibel level is. The reason for that is because if you get too close, it becomes what we call the near field. And if you've ever been whitewater rafting and you get up into the rapids and you can sit back behind them, and it just kind of rotates there, that's the near field basically for rapids. And what it will do is it will cause problems for what the sound level actually is. Many of you have probably had in the past, you've gone out possibly and you've done some short-term monitoring. And you can do that with your phone. If you want to know what it is over an 8-hour period of time for a personal monitor, we use something different. We use a dosimeter. These are the dosimeters that we use now. They are fantastic in my opinion. The reason that we love them so much, or the reason I love them so much, is because they are very, very small and compact. Somebody wears it up on their shoulder just like this, and they wear it all day. The problem that we have with just doing a spot check is that you'll do a spot check, but we don't know, in today's work environment, people are very transitory. So they're going from one place to another. And this will actually tell you your noise exposure over the entire 8-hour period of time. What we'll do at the end of the day is we'll hook them up. At the end of the day, we'll take this off. We'll download the information so we can actually chart for you, if you wanted to, the information of when they got their highest noise exposure. Because that can also be an issue. As noise is more based on dose than anything else. So you could have a very short period of time where you're in a loud environment, and if we can find a way to minimize this, just that one spot or that one area, you may not have to be in the hearing conservation program at all. So this information that we can gather is very, very good with regards to getting your program in line. So after we do the monitoring, and after we figure out whether or not you're at 85 decibels, the two magic numbers are 85 decibels and 90 decibels. At 85 decibels, you have to do everything that's up here on the screen with regards to the hearing conservation program. The only additional thing that you're going to have to do at 90 decibels is that you have to mandate that people wear hearing protection. So let's say that you are over that magic number of 85 decibels. And by the way, I call this whole program 2 pages and 2 phone calls. Because if you make 2 phone calls and you have these 2 pages, you basically have most of your noise program in place. The first phone call you're going to make is to get some monitoring done. And unfortunately right now we are still tied in. We are not able to go out, but things are progressing, and hopefully in the future we will be able to come back out and do monitoring for you. And there are all kinds of private agencies also doing the monitoring. They can tell you, and they will give you the exact same information with regards to if you're over 85 and or if you're over 90. The second part of this is the audiometric testing, and that's your second phone call. We don't do anything with audiometric testing. So there are a number of firms that you can look up with the Division of Safety and Hygiene. We do not recommend anyone in particular. I can tell you from experience that there are a number of them that will come out with a test van, and there are a number of them that have a site that you can actually go to. During the audiometric testing phase, I have a saying that blood does not lie, and that a good audiogram does not lie. And what we'll do is it will tell you whether or not you have a problem. We do that a couple of different ways. We start out with a baseline audiogram. And I know that Myers in Dayton was doing this. For those of you who may not be in an industrial setting, and maybe you're still curious about your hearing, there are a number of private firms that do this, but I understand that, and Myers is not doing it in Columbus, but I understand that they were doing it in Dayton. They would actually give you a free hearing test. And what that will do is that would give you a baseline that you could examine. And then after that, each year, you would have a subsequent annual audiogram. And what they are doing with the baseline and then the annual audiogram is that they are looking to see if there is a threshold, what they call a threshold shift in your hearing. There are temporary threshold shifts and permanent threshold shifts. I'll give you an example of something that is a temporary threshold shift. If you go to a concert and it is going to be a very, very loud concert, and you have your radio on in the car, and then you go to the concert, and when you come out, you're communicating with people and you're talking, but you've been in this very loud noise environment, more than likely you're going to have some temporary hearing loss. The other way that you can determine this is you don't even have to go anywhere. As the day progresses, what will happen is you will experience hearing, your body will get bombarded by noise and you will experience a hearing loss. That is why most of the time in the morning, you will have more acute hearing. The best example of this is if you have your radio on in the car and you come home and you park and then you go do what you're doing and go to bed, and you get up in the morning and you turn on your car and you have the radio on in the exact same level, more than likely you will turn it down a little. And the reason for that is that over time, what happened is that temporary threshold shift basically healed itself. And the reason that we can say that it healed itself is because what you have inside the hearing mechanism is that you have these little hearing cells, and they basically vibrate like this. They're hair cells, and they do like this. And what will happen is that over time, those hair cells will get damaged. And they get damaged, so throughout our lifetime, just because of all the noise that we are around, those hair cells get damaged. Those hair cells then, at night, will repair themselves. As an industry, you can imagine that when we do figure out how to repair hair, okay, I'm not so sure that they're going to go after the hair cells in our ears first. All right, it would be $1 billion industry. This is something that is not able to be reproduced now. They're doing some things with some lab rats now with stem cells that is able to replace some hair, some of the hearing. They're also able now to do something called supersonic hearing. And most of that has to do with, it's not so much what is happening inside the ear canal, but they're actually starting to do that more along the lines of the base of the neck here with the bones, etc. So I say all of that because your annual audiogram is going to be the part of that takes care of, do I have a problem? And it's going to trace that over time. As a side note, we are all losing our hearing. It happens naturally. I mentioned that I am an AARP person. If you know anybody who is getting older and they have to wear glasses, and this became a surprise to them, it became a surprise to me because over time I didn't realize that I was losing that ability and that I was automatically just starting, instead of reading something here, I would be moving it out slightly further. The same thing is happening with your hearing. It may be a decent idea to actually, if you are getting older, go and see where your hearing is now so that you understand, because there's also something called audiometric zero. And when we get to the record keeping part of this, we need to explain that what that is audiometric zero is where everybody generally can hear at their best hearing. And there has to be a shift of 10 decibels over an average of different frequencies for it to be recordable. But that audiometric zero will tell you how you are compared to just about everybody else. So I'm a fan of getting your hearing tested regardless of if you think you're in a noisy environment or not. We are all bombarded by noise more than what we would like to imagine. So, and the audiometric testing will get us there to where we need to be. So, having said that, they will automatically do the evaluation for you. And what they will do is generally, like HTI will give you a green, yellow, red status basically, and tell you what you have to do. And there are ramifications with that we're not going to go into, but basically within 21 days, you need to know if there's a standard threshold shift. Again, the place where you get the audiometric testing generally will just sound this out for you. They will tell you what you need to do next. And I would look to their expertise for that. So what can we do? Because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to protect people's hearing. And without going into the engineering controls that we can do, we can also do something called administrative controls, which is going to be, let's take somebody who has a certain exposure and let's lessen that exposure. In other words, if I'm going to be working in a loud environment, let's have Michael will do this for 4 hours, and then I'll go to something that's a little more quiet. And at that point in time, we'll put Matthew in there, and he'll do the same kind of a task. That's an administrative role. And that can be okay for noise. We do not recommend that for any kind of chemical exposure, by the way. I think that it's not the best way to do it. We always first and foremost want to engineer things out. But in reality, what happens is that we end up doing personal protective equipment. And excuse me while I reach around in my lab, but what we've got is I've got just bags and bags of hearing protection. And there are 3 types of hearing protection. You can have a muff, you can have a plug, and we also have ear caps. And the common question to me is always, Michael, what's the best type? Well, what we do is we look for something called a noise reduction rating. And it's on every package, or it will be on the box itself. And in general, you're going to get a plug that's going to be 28 to 32. And that's really great. You're going to get the muffs that are going to be 25 or 26. They can go much higher. It just depends, but that's just a relative term. The other thing that you can use is you can use something called caps. These are my personal ones that I use. The NRR value on this is only 23. So as a noise guy, people are always asking me, Michael, why would you use this over this or a pair of muffs? And the reason is that I prefer these. And when we break it down across the spectrum, hearing protection that you will wear, that you will properly insert, is going to be the best protection that you have for almost all of our applications. Because what happens is that it takes an awful lot of noise for us to be in a noisy environment. Most of my readings are going to be between 85 and 95. And all of the different types of hearing protection are going to be adequate protection for those types of environments. It is very rare that I will get a time-weighted average over 8 hours of a noise exposure at 100. I've only had it happen to me a couple of times in my 30-year career here, and it was with air knives. Air knives going against aluminum metal. And that was extremely loud, of course, and at that particular point in time, they were looking for all kinds of engineering controls, and people were working in booths and only going out in the area when they absolutely had to. So as a rule of thumb, these work great for me. I prefer them because when I put your hearing in, I can take it out very quickly. Also, if my hands are dirty, I don't have to worry about getting the hearing protection compromised. And then all of a sudden I bring in another problem when I'm putting in the hearing protection. Speaking of that, let's talk a little bit about the training that is involved. I am not a huge advocate of spending an hour trying to do hearing protection training when 15 minutes will do. So one of the things that you want to look at when you're going to be doing your hearing protection training is that you want to let people know that the hearing protection has to be worn properly, or else it actually could be causing more harm than good. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you have hearing protection and it isn't properly inserted and you have a canal that the noise is actually going into, it can cause, think of it this way. Remember how in the olden days you'd see somebody with one of those metal pieces that sits in their ears so that they can hear better, and they go, huh? Well, guess what? What they were doing was they were trying to amplify that noise and get it to come into the ear at a smaller distance. So it doesn't happen very often, but properly wearing hearing protection, in other words, making sure that it seals right, is very, very important. Now, I will show you something here that is very, very common. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to roll up the hearing protection when we're going to insert it. And this is a very common type. You have the type of plugs, and also on the back, in case you're not sure of all of this, they actually have some little meaning instructions for you as well. But what you want to do is you want to make sure you open up your ear canal. And people always say, you'll see people do this to put it in, and they'll be, okay, I'm good to go. That will work for a small percentage of the population. For most people, though, they need to open up the ear canal. And what happens is that the ear canal is, sorry about that, the ear canal is generally not a straight line. I myself, the other reason I use the caps that I use is that inside my ear canal, the cleft is very, very high. The average person is probably, something just really small like that. Mine is basically like this. And what that means is that if I'm going to try to put in hearing protection, and I do that, I have to try to get over that wall in order to do it. So it causes a lot of problems for me. Now, I had a boss that, and he is since retired, so I can tell this story at ease without any ramifications. But he had very, very large ears, and ears like Dumbo, okay? So, and what he would do is he would take the hearing protection and he would put it in his ear, and he would do it properly, and it would sit, and you're supposed to let it sit and seed for about 2 or 3 seconds, and then you can sing a little song, and you can go like that, and then it opens up. Well, what happened the one time is he put those in, and he ended up having to go to the nursing station at the facility there, because what happened is that it went into his ear canal. He has the opposite problem. He has really large ear canal, and it went all the way in, and he couldn't get it out afterwards. So for him, at the time, they didn't have these, but now they have all types of hearing protection. Some of them have little straps associated with it, so that wouldn't actually happen to him now. And they also have many different sizes and many different shapes. And some of them are plastic and some of them are ribbed. And there's just a plethora of different types of hearing protection. The long and the short of it is, the best type of hearing protection that you can use is the one that's going to be most comfortable for you. I do not personally get caught up in the NRR value. What you're going to try to do is you're going to try to find something that is comfortable. That's the most important part of the hearing protection. So, and with that, we're going to talk finally about the record keeping. The record keeping is going to be taken care of by the audiologist that you utilize. So I will tell people what you're looking for is you're going to be looking for, and thank you for moving that, what we're going to be looking for with regards to the record keeping is that the audiologist is basically going to tell you whether this needs to be OSHA recordable or not. And at that point in time, again, you can go with what they are saying. We have courses on the noise and how to calculate all of that. I'm not going to get into that today. This third page here is what you're going to have with your health effects of noise. Something else that we are currently working on at the Division of Safety and Hygiene, which I think will be very, very beneficial, is we're doing micro short videos. And one of the videos that we're doing right now is we're doing a video on noise and what you have to do with regards to training. These videos are going to be anywhere from 3 to 6 minutes, and they're going to help you, and there's a quiz at the end, and they're going to help you with any training that you have. I imagine that there are a number of people out here that have several different hats, maybe human resources and maybe safety at the same time. And these micro short training videos will be helpful with regards to what you have to train on with regards to noise. Because as part of that training that you're doing, you do have to talk about what are the hazards of noise. So I don't know, Matthew, I have not been able to see the chat. Is there any, if you do have questions, you can put them in the chat, or if anybody has anything, I'm willing to talk about noise before we move on to the next subject.
I think we had one question in the chat related to, is there a hair ear club for men? I saw that.
Like I said, when I tell people that these are hair cells, and I tell them, you know, I don't believe that that's going to be the first thing that we go after. So, yes, I appreciate that.
Other than that, no, there are no other any questions at this time. Okay,
great. The next thing then that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to be speeding things up quite a bit, what I want you to know about is the Voluntary Respiratory Protection Program. This is, and by the way, we are not talking about masks. All right, this is not COVID masks. We're talking about voluntary respiratory protection. When you have a chemical exposure and you have somebody who is concerned with it, and they want to do something about it. Back in 2003, OSHA did something very wonderful. They changed their respiratory protection program so that when people have an issue, they can actually utilize respiratory protection without having to go through the full program. So what I'm referring to here is, and I appreciate that. I don't know, Matt, if you can pull up that second document or not. What we're referring to is this type of a respirator here. And so, yep, that's perfect. The Voluntary Respiratory Protection Program basically is covering what they call the N95. So we've all been hearing about that over the last year. If you never knew anything about an N95, believe me, my mom even called me up and said, hey, they're talking about that N95 that you talk about all the time. And I said, yes, they are. But it's not what we're using currently from the CDC. So again, the CDC has all the information with regards to those types of masks. I'm talking about voluntary respiratory protection. And this is the type of mask that is most commonly used. If you are out there and you are in human resources, I recommend that you take that document that is going to be provided to you after this program, and you put it in your training program for your initial hires. When you put that in the program for your initial hires, they will be signing off that if they wish to, they can use this type of voluntary respiratory protection, and you can basically hand it out like candy. Why this is so important is because I mentioned earlier that dust is 15 milligrams per meter cubed. What that means in English is that you're going to have an enormous amount of particulate, an enormous amount of dust before you're over a limit. So much so that it would make a number of people uncomfortable before you're over what the permissible exposure limit is. This allows your employees to wear it, and that then they are protected. And it protects the company, and it also protects the individual. I say it protects the company because if you are in a position where you have to do some type of, you're part of the administrative part of this. I went to court for Schottensteins a number of years ago, and it changed my consulting style forever. Because in a courtroom, it's once you are at 51%, you are fully bought into whatever the narrative is. And that's what attorneys do. And it wasn't so much about let's find out about the science as it is let's see if we can put up enough information that shows that we have a problem. And as a scientist, this is very, very difficult for the industrial hygiene community because we are constantly learning. We are constantly figuring out what toxicological data we need in order to have protective measures put in place or to have certain protective measures decline, all right, and to be called off. The Schottensteins Corporation did not have a voluntary respiratory protection program. If they had, they wouldn't have even been in court. So it protects the employer, and it also protects the employee. Again, that's why I think it's such a fantastic piece of legislation. Now, if you look there and you will see that first section that I am talking about, it says filtering face pieces and dust masks. That's what I'm talking about here. There is no medical surveillance that needs to be done if you are using this type of a respirator. This is where I recommend using voluntary respiratory protection. If you have to up your game and you need to use a half-face respirator, something like this, I would recommend that you no longer go with a voluntary respiratory protection program. You can by law, but at that point in time, it becomes that whole next section there where you're going to have to get some type of medical clearance. You're going to, it's much more cumbersome, and you're going to have a lot more paperwork associated with it. And it says all other types of respirators is where I'm at. So you will notice the filtering face piece part of this only covers that first section. Okay? After that, you're going to get into the medical evaluation. You're getting into cleaning and storing and all types of things along that line. With this type of respirator, all you're doing is basically you're using it and you're tossing it away. Now, having said that, I do want to make sure that if you're using this N95, there are different types. There are types that are good for fume, mist, vapors, and there are one-time usage respirators, so you do have to have a little bit of knowledge associated with it. The other thing that I will recommend is that when you're doing and you do have to do a little bit of training with this, and so if you're a human resource person, when you're initially having people fill out this paperwork, you want to show them what that respirator is, because there's a possibility that you have these in your facility and you have these in your facility, and you don't want the people to grab the wrong one. You want them to understand this is what we're talking about. If you get into this, I recommend you getting a hold of an industrial hygienist, or you can call up our agency. We'll step you through the rest of the things that you need for this particular type of a program. And if you want to go voluntary use, you can. It's just something that, like I said, I do not personally recommend it. And as an agency, we would like to talk to you about it before you decide to go that route. So this is the respirator that we're referring to at the N95. And I believe with that, I wanted to go about 45 minutes, and I think we have accomplished that. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them. And I would personally like to thank Matthew for helping me out with the technical difficulties. I truly appreciate that.
No, thank you, Michael. We did have one person who mentioned that they have the Apple Watches that I believe are I don't think it's in the first gens, but maybe it's the third gen and up, have the audio hearing monitoring that's on the watches. Is that something you'd recommend?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that. I do not have that technology. I apologize. Maybe they could actually. I'm not familiar with the Apple Watch. I have my work phone, which is an Apple, and I also have my personal cell phone is, but I do not have any of the other ancillary things with that. So,
Katrina, I hate to put you on the spot. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? She said she has Generation 4.
Yes, I actually have Generation 4, and as he was talking, I knew it's an automatic app on your watch. All you do is get on there and actually turn it on. You go to your settings and turn it on or off, and then basically go to the application and start the sound as you're in the area you need to be. I'm actually, when we leave here, I'm going to go test it out because I have yet to use it, and I've known it's been there until he mentioned the phone, and then I got on there and I thought, well, I'll be out testing that here shortly. So it's real simple to use. I just wanted to know how accurate it was.
If you don't mind, Katrina, by the time we do this recording, we get at the other information, perhaps if you wouldn't mind sharing that test results with us, and we'll add it to the information that goes out to everybody. See
Absolutely.
if that was helpful or not. And speaking of that, Michael, the app that you mentioned, are those free, and do you recommend any specific apps for that?
The apps generally are free. They do have some pay apps that you can do. There's quite a few. We're looking at the NIOSH app. NIOSH sound level meter app. And if people have problems with that, you can also call in and we can step you through how to utilize that. Any of the industrial hygienists and several of the safety people, I believe, are very adept at that. I will say one thing with regards to a watch. The one thing you want to be careful of, and I think that it's probably very, very good technology, is that when we are doing the monitoring itself, we always want to keep it someplace up around where the hearing zone is. And the same thing when we do other types of monitoring, we like to keep it somewhere in the breathing zone, or in this case, you want to do it in the hearing zone. So if you're using your watch and you're going into a loud environment, you want to be cautious of that. And so when you're using your app on your phone, that's the other thing. We want you to, you can actually take the app, because noise, it's very, very, first of all, it's very directional. But as if you double the distance, you actually drop the amount of noise by 6 decibels. So it is very, very distance dependent. So one of the greatest things that we try to do if we have a loud environment is we try to get people away from it. Sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot of distance before you're in a much better place with regards to the decibel level. So I would like to see what happens with those Apple Watches. That's the one thing that I would be conscious of. Also, you might look a little silly, quite frankly, if you're walking around like this all day too. So, but I think that it's really, really great technology that they're coming out with.
Michael, testing, I guess, let's say it's a winter day versus a summer day at the shop, and the garage doors are open at the facility when normally they might not be open at certain times of the seasons. Would that affect the decibels enough to warrant a second look? Or
I'm glad you mentioned that. From my experience, whether or not the garage doors are open or closed is not a significant factor unless there's significant noise outside. However, that is an excellent point, because what does affect the hearing, and you can also do this on any noise monitor, is that wind against the microphone will cause our results to be just absolutely useless. And so what they do is they will have a wind socket that you can utilize. And I know I can hear, I know we have some people from the Division of Safety and Hygiene in here. They also, just for the record, they have an external microphone that you can use with this as well. All right. So, and it is better, and they also have wind socks that you can utilize with that. I did want to bring that up because I guarantee you somebody's going to say, hey, this microphone isn't as great as what you can get some ancillary products like the Apple Watch and the other things that are going to help that. Again, what we're looking for is a general assessment to see, is this something that you should be looking into further? And if you go out and you get a reading of 85, I generally will tell you, when I'm going out and doing an initial assessment, I'm looking for 86 to 80. I'm really looking for around 88 decibels before I will go back and actually do a full noise monitoring session, because more than likely, if it's 85 with your phone or with something else, you're not going to be over the hearing conservation.
awesome. Well, Michael, again, thank you so much for the information. And as was mentioned, I think during this, the 2 documents that were sent to me will also, of course, be attached along with the recording after this presentation is over. So you'll have all of that as well. And we'll try and get the NIOSH links and see what happens from Katrina's test as well. And we'll share all that information with you all after this is over. Unless there's any other.
There's one quick question in there. Yep.
Yes. Holly, do you want?
Oh, no. How long should the test be run? Is this an all-day thing?
Generally, what we will do is it's actually based on dose. So I'm going to give you an industrial hygiene answer. Basically, what we want to do is we want to do an 8-hour test. All right. But if your shift is 10 hours, then we want to look at it for basically the length of the shift. However, we do know that as soon as you reach a specific dose, that 50% dose that they talk about, we don't talk about things as far as dose because it just makes the water really muddy for everyone. So we just talk about 85 decibels. But in general, what we're going to do is we're going to want to do a shift test. So in other words, if you're working for 8 hours, you'd like to do 8 hours. If we're working for 10 hours, we'd like to do 10 hours. If it's a 12-hour shift, we'd like to do that. So There are caveats, and we can also do it, if you're a 12-hour shift, we can do an 8-hour shift, and we can extrapolate data as well. But based on the noise level that you're actually experiencing, we can maneuver how long that test actually has to take. So, but in general, let's say 8 hours.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you again to Michael for this, and it's been a pleasure
Michael.
to work again with the Delaware Safety Council for this program
Yes,
year.
Yes, thanks. It's been fun. But we will see you again at the expo in October. Okay, I think that's our next partnership.
I believe that's
So we'll look forward to
accurate. Yeah.
seeing you then. Yeah.
And yeah, so much more information about the next program year, which again starts July 1st, will be sent to both safety councils independently with their own dates and times, and all that information will be sent out here from corresponding safety councils in the next week or so. Again, it's been great to work with y'all, and everyone have a great rest of the month. And we'll hopefully see at least the Marion Safety Council folks back with us next month.
Yeah. Thanks to Matthew and his staff, and have a good summer, everyone in Marion, Delaware. We'll see you next month.
Thank
Bye,
you again,
everyone.
Michael.
Thank you.